romance is also often put on like the forefront of everything. And a lot of people's lives revolve around their partner and their relationships. And you can have a fulfilling life, not necessarily with that.
Hello, everyone. This is Sex Positivity Unfiltered, where we talk about sex and we are not polite about it. My name is Lyndsey Murray.
And I'm Denise Stratton.
And in today's episode, we are covering asexuality and agender, both what it means to be asexual and or agender, as well as the misconceptions. To help us cover this topic, we have a special guest today, SJ Richman. SJ is a Dallas native, a multidimensional artist with specializations in voiceover, theater design, 2D, and 3D art. They have explored and studied queer history both independently and at Columbia College Chicago, and is an advocate for the ace community. SJ, we're so excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is a topic we've been wanting to do for quite a while.
Yes.
And although we have done our research and we look into asexuality, what better person to have come and help us cover this topic than someone, I think you probably know more than us.
A little bit. I've done my deep dives and have personal experience. So
Good. So, I mean, just to start us off, just since this is the overall theme, how would you describe asexuality to someone who doesn't really know these terms?
Yeah, asexuality is defined by somebody who does not feel sexual attraction, and that comes in a spectrum, as well as differentiating between romantic attraction, sexual attraction, kink, all these different types of things, and just not having the quote-unquote heterosexual, heteronormative impulse to have sexual intercourse and or romantic attraction.
Okay.
Yeah.
And for our listeners, do you identify as asexual?
I do. I identify as demisexual, which is sometimes feeling sexual attraction if a personal connection or emotional connection is formed first. I also identify as agender. I use they, them pronouns. And agender is a term that is used for someone who kind of lacks an identity with gender and feels a disconnection from it. I always like to say that I see gender as a performance or like accessories that I can put on. So one day I feel like just a blob, a human who lives their life, and sometimes I want to throw on a bow tie or a mustache or high femme makeup and do drag. So it's all depending on the day also.
Yeah.
Very fluid. Like it just, Okay.
And gender really is kind of a construct.
Yeah. For sure. And like on the performance scale, like I'm a techie in theater. Like if gender is a performance, I'm behind the scenes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Very cool.
And I feel like, are you, so I assume you grew up in the theater a little bit.
Yeah, I did theater starting, I think through elementary school, but I went to Booker T. Washington, downtown Dallas, which is an arts performing high school. And there I kind of explored what there is to theater. I've done musical theater performance, I've done improv, but I really fell in love with like stage management and behind the scenes work. And then in college is where I fell into my specialty, which is prop design. And I love making like specialty props, something that you just can't find either at a vintage store or like Target or something, and has to be created from scratch. That's my like bread and butter.
Hey, that's awesome, actually. Wow. Very many creatives.
Thank you.
Well, and for our listeners, we'll have like in the episode description, we'll have like where to find SJ and the things that you make, and we'll promote you for sure, so everyone can see your stuff. So.
Yeah. Cool. So I assume like just being in the theater though, like that kind of gives you almost like a nice safe space of being able to explore, because you do get, I've seen very many times where, a female will play a male part.
Yeah, for sure. That is called a pants role. Pantaloon, I believe, is the origin of it, which I have done many of pants role. But yeah, it's just fun to play around with gender all the time. I mean, even in Shakespearean times, women weren't allowed to be on the stage, so men would perform in drag as women. And I think there's also a lot of sexual fluidity in the theatrical space. There's a lot of queer people that enjoy the theatricality of it. Yeah, and it's just a really great environment to be in.
Oh, that's awesome. So how did you discover that you were part of the ace community?
Yeah, so I sexuality never really occurred to me. Like I had an older sister growing up, and we talked about boys, and in elementary school about like, I don't know, Big Time Rush was a thing, and like One Direction was a whole thing, and people were talking about, oh, which boy band members you like? And I was like, oh, it seems like this guy doesn't get a lot of people liking him. I'll pick that guy to have a crush on. And it wasn't until later in life that I realized like, that's not a thing that you get to choose. You just have that like draw to somebody. And so that was kind of my first inclination that I might be on the ace spectrum. And then in high school, I was part of our GSA. Back then it was called the Gay Straight Alliance. We have now rebranded to the Gender Sexuality Alliance, which I think is lovely. And that's where I kind of started learning about all the terms and discovered asexuality as a identity. And I kind of really related to that. I do remember one time in high school, I was talking about this with a theater teacher that I had. And he said to me, oh, I used to identify as asexual and I grew out of it. It just means you're gay. I'm like,
oh, it's like a phase or something.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, okay, that seems really invalidating and also not true. Especially in my adult life, I do identify as just queer with a capital Q. I now have moved on to, I was originally like bisexual and I got into the definitions of it and I was like, well, I'm non-binary and I feel attraction towards most everybody. So now I've moved more into the like pan-romantic. I was just attached to bisexuality because I like the colors better.
Well, that's it. So like, you were in high school, we started learning about like the different terms.
Yeah.
I love to hear that because I know how I grew up, and Denise, maybe for you too. I feel like that was not really available. When I was in high school, it definitely was not. It was kind of like you assume everyone is straight and then you know what like gay and bisexual means, and that was like about it.
I mean, it was a big high school here in Arlington that I grew up in, and we had probably my junior senior year we had a GSA, we had a Gay Straight Alliance as well. There was no way in hell my closeted ass was going to join that, right? But it was there, so I knew people were learning about it, but it was a very small club. Again, it was something that it had to be sought out, right? They don't teach you. You have to actually go and be comfortable enough to.
My high school was so small. I grew up in South Texas. It was so small. There was no Gay Straight Alliance. It was just kind of like not a thing. I mean, you just really assumed everyone was straight. Yeah. And I look back and I'm like, my God, that must have been horrible for anyone who wasn't.
Yeah, because there was plenty of people in your high school.
And now that we're older, I mean, you keep up with people. I mean, so many people in my class are queer.
It's so nice to see, honestly.
It's so nice to see. I'm like, you're happy, you're living life, you're thriving. But like back in high school, you couldn't do that.
What's really funny is because I was on the basketball team, of course, and I was, I did the sports and everything. And my core group of friends, all of us, literally every single one of us, except for my bestie, my one straight bestie, ended up, we were all straight in high school. And then as soon as we graduated, everyone was queer.
That's so
I just
funny.
flocked.
Because I had the same experience.
Really?
Yeah. I had I didn't really have a core group in high school, but in middle school, I had a group of friends that we hung out every day. And all of us turned out a different letter in LGBT, which is super cool. I love that. Yeah.
I love to see it.
Nice.
Well, so would you say, I have like maybe a random question, but like the terms agender and non-binary, are they the same? Or are they slightly different?
So non-binary, again, is like a spectrum. There's all kinds of different identities that fall underneath it. I think agender falls under that umbrella term.
Gotcha.
Because some non-binary people feel both genders, or one gender one day and one gender another day, or both genders so much or both overlapping. It really just depends on the person.
It's really about the fluidity of
exactly.
it all. Okay,
and
that's
sense.
Its own, also gender fluid is its own flag and identity as well. The amount of umbrella terms are insane.
And I think it's important to note that also you don't have to stick with a label too. Like you can identify as bisexual one day and then move on to pansexuality. You can think you're bi and then be gay or a lesbian. And same goes with gender presentation. You can be trans and explore that. And if you decide it's not for you, that's totally fine. You can explore being non-binary and you decide that that is not what was working for you. And that's also fine.
I love that a lot, because I would imagine if you feel that pressure to stick to one label, there's really no room to explore.
Exactly.
It's like, this is how I am. And it's like, well, maybe not. I mean, this is how I feel today, but maybe I have an experience that kind of changes my mind or.
Yeah. And I think that's important why like the Q stands for queer, but it also stands for questioning. Like we need to make a safe space that people can explore what they're interested in and explore who they are without having any hostility or like judgment as well. And I think it's also really great that we have more like people in media changing and exploring who they are. Like Renee Rapp was bisexual for a really long time and she came out as a lesbian recently. And Demi Lovato explored her non-binary gender but is okay with she and they pronouns. So I think it's great that you can move around in this space.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So just to give our listeners who don't really know very much about the spectrum, we also have gender queer and we have
Gender fluid, two-spirit. Bigender is a thing too.
That's
So
the
yeah, it's just like depends on the person again and what they feel they identify with the most. And it is fluid essentially. But we know that gender, I like to think of it as like a circle graph where masculine is on one end and feminine is on the other, but on the other axis, it's all gender and no gender. And it can fall kind of anywhere in between in that graph.
All of those terms can have like unique definitions depending on the person. Like even term asexuality, you know, some asexual people have sex and some don't. Right?
Yeah.
Like even that, like that's the term, but depending on the person, that means whatever it means to them.
Yeah. So in asexuality, there is sex favorability, sex positive, sex averse or sex repulsed, and then a negative view. I think in my perspective, there's not a whole lot of people that have a sex negative point of view unless it's like geared in like maybe religion or spirituality or some kind of like apprehension to it. But yeah, it can be a range of what that individual is comfortable with. There are asexual and aromantic people that will be there for their partner because it's what they need, but it's not necessarily what they have a drive to pursue, but are able to provide that for them.
That's so interesting that you say that the negative is something that's not as common, because I feel like that's the rap that the stereotype everyone get is that asexual people are just, they don't want sex, they are repulsed by it, they even
like kind of judge it or and in my experience that's not usually what you see.
No, for sure. And we again want to create a space where everyone feels welcome, nobody yucks anybody else's yum, and I think there's in my experience, no judgment from the ace community for people who are sexually active or have that sexual connection. For me, I kind of envy it in a certain way because of how normalized it is, but it's just not my truth. But yeah, it is a difficult world to navigate, and I think it's important to have that time to explore and discuss what it is to feel attraction in romance and sexuality.
Do you have any other misconceptions or stereotypes that you encounter all the time or I guess how would you address those?
Yeah, for sure. So there is a belief that asexuality is perceived as a mental disorder called hypoactive sexual desire disorder, or HSDD, or inhibited sexual desire, which is ISD, and sexual dysfunction.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've heard those terms before.
Wow.
Because everything, in like Western psychology, like everything is pathologized. And so like even as a therapist, we'll refer to like the DSM or like the Diagnostic Statistic Manual. But I'm always really cautious about that because I don't think everything needs to be pathologized. Like I don't think it's a disorder. I just think some people are asexual and don't want to have sex. But yeah, I've heard those terms before and it's kind of a pet peeve of mine, to be honest.
People used to think being gay was a mental disorder.
And it used to be like in the books.
Yeah.
In older versions of it.
Or people who would do anything that's kinky also.
Right.
Yes.
Mental disorder.
So another misconception is like that asexual people can't feel any kind of love. There's disbelief that asexuality is even a real sexual orientation and that they're just kind of shy, which is not the case. And it's also sometimes confused with like celibacy and abstinence or anti-sexualism. It's also a big misconception that asexual people don't do relationships. I know a lot of asexual people in relationships, and it's just about finding the right person who understands your point of view and what your attraction is and working with that and communicating and having a life together.
How does it affect your dating life? Like, how do you?
I don't have any. I'm working on it. I'm trying to, go out to more queer spaces and just meet people who have a lot in common with me. I do find myself in a space that has a lot of sex positive environments, so it is a little bit difficult to navigate. But I think it's, for me, especially like being on the demisexual end of things, I really want to start at a base of like friendship and then have that progression. It's not necessarily something that I need to start with. I would love to like have my eyes set on somebody and feel the spark that is so often talked about. I just haven't had that experience in the past. So I have come to the term of like, that's probably not going to happen. So let's see what I can work with. And I've had past relationships where we were friends for like 3 or 4 years and then started developing feelings. So that's kind of what I have planted my seeds for.
So you fall under the concept of, I want to be, I need my best friend first. And then,
for sure.
Then we develop an attraction. That's so interesting. Okay, I'm going to ask you ignorant lesbian question. When you see someone in the street or even celebrities, you don't feel any type of sexual attraction to these?
No, I mean, I see them for who they are, and I see that they're physically attractive, of course. Like, people are beautiful, but there's no like horniness
it's
or
an
like
aesthetic attraction.
Yeah, it's an aesthetic attraction. But yeah, I totally don't get when you just like have that moment where you're like, oh my God, like I would get down and dirty, like I'd tap that, like that doesn't come to mind at all. It's just like, oh, they're cool. They look cool. I like their outfit. Their face is pretty. But like, yeah, there's no like internal push.
Yeah, I'm the opposite. I pretty much, I'll see someone that's attractive and this might be the 12-year-old boy in me, but I almost instantly envision like having an intimate moment with them. I'm usually attracted, like sexually attracted to you most when I don't know you.
Interesting.
And then I start to get to know you. Maybe we become friends. Maybe something happens that we have that bond. And then that's where my sexual attraction will either go 2 avenues. 90% of the time it fizzles out.
Yeah.
Like I no longer have like I no longer envision us getting down and dirty. Or for the people that I start to date, then, it becomes higher, right?
Yeah, it's so interesting. Hookup culture is so prevalent in the queer community, and that's just something, I mean, I've tried it, but it's like definitely not something that I have comfort with, and not something I choose to explore either. It kind of, for me, it doesn't feel genuine. Like I really want those moments of intimacy to feel like a genuine connection.
Of course. Have you ever been made to feel like something is wrong with you for not having that sexual attraction? And I'm not saying anything is wrong with you, but has anyone ever made you feel that way?
Thankfully, no. I haven't had that experience. I think it's mostly internalized, honestly. Like, I feel like I am different for not having those same feelings. Like, I remember growing up and like my friends dating people, and I've never really had a pursuit as well. Like, I think I don't cross many people's minds, and who knows if that is true or not. But like, I had a little dating crush type situation in middle school, and literally all we did was hold hands from the lunchroom to the library, and that was the entirety of our relationship.
I mean, middle school.
Yeah, that's also middle school.
School.
But yeah, I mean, I've heard stories of people's like first encounters in early high school and middle school, and I'm like, that wasn't even on my radar. So.
Okay.
So I want to go back to like the teacher that kind of dismissed you.
Yeah.
And said, things like that. Do you find that people kind of view the ace community as like naive, or even they just haven't lived enough to know?
For sure. It's definitely something that people think the ace person will grow out of. And it does happen. I've seen it happen. But I think intrinsically, if you feel asexual and part of this community and then do develop kind of sexual attraction, there's still an element, to me at least, that has that reservation. I think the naivete is definitely something that is put on us. And I think that there's an element of judgment, like, oh, you just haven't explored enough, or you need to put yourself out there. Having some kind of embarrassment put on you as well is not a great look. It's not a great feeling. But I think the most important part of it is like being true to who you are and doing things that you're comfortable with and exploring that way.
Okay.
It almost sounds like there's this immature, like, stigma or something.
Yeah, definitely like infantilization is a big problem too.
Now that we're talking about it, has this ever been your experience, or do you know like anything about this? But I've had clients before that they're questioning between, am I asexual, or have I just been through so much sexual trauma that I just don't want to do that anymore? Maybe there's even like an overlap there. I don't know.
For sure.
But like I know a lot of people who really struggle with that.
Yeah, there's definitely, obviously, sexual assault and sexual trauma is a huge thing. And that does cause sex aversion or sexual repulsion in some individuals. I thankfully have not had any trauma in my sexual life. But that just proves that it's not a causation of that. It's just a thing that you experience, and that's who you are. But yeah, it is definitely an overlap.
Okay.
So as far as like your experience, especially with dating or, just, friendships, are there any situations or anything that you have to navigate differently as someone who is part of the ace community compared to, there's like obviously with the heterosexual dating life and then the LGBT dating life, we have a completely different culture, right? So is there the same?
Yeah, I think it's just feeling like a little disjointed from other people in my life. I remember there was this moment we were at home during the pandemic and we decided to put on Sex and the City for the first time. And I was watching it and I was seeing all this, discussion of sexuality and going on the dating scene and all this. And I was like, oh, this wasn't even made for me. Like it felt so disjointed. And I honestly was validating of like, it's okay that I'm not relating to this at all because it's not my story. It's not made for me.
That brings me to my next question because, all right, so part of the sex positive movement is that we try to be very inclusive, with all types of lifestyles, bodies, cultures, everything like that, right? That includes asexuality. Do you ever feel like the sex positive movement doesn't include you? Like, do you ever feel disjointed from that?
I think so in a way. I think it's just like, it's almost like it's not relevant to me to a degree, but also I think we have a lot to learn from it. I identify as a sex positive person. I'm not going to like tell somebody that they are wrong for having sex and pursuing their sex life. I think it's great to hear about other people's sexual encounters and what they're exploring. It does, to a certain degree, make me a little uncomfortable just because I value like privacy and intimacy. Okay. But I think that it's really important to learn, but also accept the sex positivity and include people who are maybe sex neutral and sex negative in that discussion.
Okay. And then I guess same question, but with the LGBT community, because I do know that a lot of times when you're talking about the queer community, you're talking about sexuality, right? Do you ever feel disjointed? For
sure. Okay. There are a lot of people who leave out asexuality because they just assume it's like somebody who is heterosexual but doesn't want to pursue a relationship. But there is a lot of queerness in asexuality itself. And I find that a lot of people in the ace community do fall under other queer romantic perspectives and identities too.
That's really interesting. I never even thought about that. That the assumption would be it's just a hetero person who doesn't want to have sex. Yeah. And that's not true.
Exactly.
Yeah, necessarily.
Okay. So, all right. So the three big ace terms that you see everywhere are agender, asexuality, and aromanticism. So what would be the difference between asexuality and aromanticism? Yeah,
so asexuality is based on like the physical act of having sex, and aromantic identity is more about that intimacy and connection. So there are people who would identify as like bisexual but are aromantic, and it just means that they want to have sex but they don't want any like personal attachment, kind of like that hookup culture. So you can have any variety of combination of asexuality and romanticism. So the terms would be hetero-romantic, homo-romantic, bi-romantic, pan-romantic, and aromantic. And those can be paired with heterosexuality and the like. And asexuality, of course.
So when we're talking about romanticism, are we literally talking about like just like being in a relationship? Just in general,
at least from my perspective. Romantic attraction and sexual attraction, as well as sensual attraction, are all totally different things. So the sexual is obviously like the physical act of everything and that kind of intimacy. The romantic gestures would be like going on a date, having like a long talk, a deep connection. And then the sexual attraction is all of the acts that are physical without it being sex. So like cuddling, having your hair done by the other person, a massage, that kind of thing.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow, I didn't even know that you would like break up those two. Wow. Okay.
Oh, we like to dissect.
which I like.
Yeah.
Because it just gives you language to like, because I think we lump everything in. I'm going to go back a little bit to when you're talking about Sex and the City. Sex and the City is a very sexualized show.
Yes.
But honestly, like as a straight person, I feel like when I was dating, I was on the online apps, you go on a date. There's this element of like, would I fuck you? on the first, like there is though.
That's fair.
It's like
Yes,
if
that
you
is
wouldn't,
fair.
we're
Yeah.
probably not gonna have a second
And that's the
date.
expectation too.
Yes, yeah.
On certain ends.
And that's kind of like Sex in the City. It's just very sexualized, very like the attraction, the spark. It has to be there instantly, or else it's like, no, I'm not really, you know. So if you don't have that, then you're not, like you said, you're not going to feel like that show's not made for you, because you're like, that's not what I want to experience when I'm dating.
Yeah, and I've pretty much given up on the apps just because I know that is what a lot of people are seeking, are that like instant connection. And I'm also terrible at texting, so I've just kind of given up on that. What I'm now looking for is, I idealize like a meet cute situation, like, oh, I see you across the coffee shop and you're just looking at me and I'm looking at you and there's something there. So that's kind of my like dream moment, but I know that that's like kind of hard to come by. But that's kind of the goal in my ACE experience.
Oh my goodness.
So whenever this is all broken down, it's nice because it's like, well, what if I like this one thing, but this other thing I'm not particularly interested in? Like, that can feel weird.
Yeah.
But then when you have the language, you're like, well, that's not weird. That just means I have this type of attraction, but not this one. Which
Right.
I love having all the language. I think that's so important.
And all the labels get so stigmatized too. It's like, why would you have to have all of these broken down? It's because having that label or identity is very affirming.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, I feel like that with just even within the lesbian community, all the different terms, which it bothers a lot of lesbians having, you know, what do you mean I have to identify as butch?
mask.
Yeah, you know, STEM, all these
Uh-huh.
and everything. And it bothers some people, but I found comfort in it because I finally found a label that, oh, I can be kind of androgynous, but more on the masculine side. Like this is my term, which is really nice. But I want to get back to the apps. I never thought about that, because you are right. Whenever when I was on Tinder or I was on any of those apps, like the swiping is pretty much, that was the question I would ask, you know?
Yeah, that's how you're matching.
Bam. Right. So your experience on the apps, how did you decide who you were going to reach out to?
It's hard. Honestly, the one time I like had an actual like Tinder moment, the phone was in another person's hand. Like, we traded our phones and like we're messaging people on other people's devices. And that's kind of how my movement into reality kind of happened. And I was like, this is terrible. But yeah, when I scroll, it's like, do you have a nice face, I guess, is the first thing. But I always go to the bio. Like, if your bio's empty, you're gone.
Okay.
But I try to find some commonalities, and I try to find something that I think is interesting about them, that maybe So yeah, it was never about like that instant, like, do it or not type of thing. It's always been a little more.
I think it's so smart to look at the bio, even if you do have a sexual attraction to people. Well, I guess I'm speaking from my own experience. Like, if I found someone who was like really attractive, but their bio was like such a turn off to me, I couldn't really look past that. Because it was like, you know, people can just be kind of gross on the apps. You know, you just read their bio and you're like, no, absolutely not.
No, yeah. On a previous podcast, we did like how to do online dating. Then the first one is obviously your presentation, right? So you need to make sure that that first picture is not of, you know, your family or your dog or whatever.
I don't understand people who like have filters over their face too, or like have a picture of just their dog, or like a meme. I'm like, what is that?
Or every photo's a group photo, and you're like, which one are you?
Right.
I don't know who this is. Like, people are not good at having a good profile.
No, not at all. But the second one was obviously the bio, and you don't want it to be like just an emoji, because then, you know, same, I would swipe past, but also you don't want it to be like this long novel that I am not going to read, right? Because, you know.
And also, if it's blank, it's definitely a bot.
Yeah.
For sure.
Oh, bots.
Or if the bio is like, I mean, I'm calling out men here real quick, but like, I saw plenty of bios that were all about like what the woman needs to do. Like, I need to find a woman who's this. If it was all about like what they're looking for, it was like an immediate no for me. Because I was like, that tells me nothing about you. You're just basically saying, if I go on a date with you, you got to fit all these criteria. And I'm like,
ew.
No, gross. Yeah,
this is my checklist.
Yeah, and I'm like, nope.
That brings me to like typing. Like, when people say they have a type, I also like fully don't relate to that at all, just because of that like pan romance. I'm like, I would think I think all people are kind of cool. It just depends on the person. But I find that like somebody who's like, I need a guy who's 6 foot with brown hair and blue eyes. I'm like, why? Like, why is that important to you? And that's kind of my another disconnect that I have of like,
people can really box themselves in by having a type. Like, it's got to be this exact type, and it's like you're really kind of narrowing down who you could connect to.
Have you guys seen that TikTok of I'm looking for a man in finance, 6'5", blue eyes?
Oh yeah,
and she's like, it's so good. But yeah, I don't have that.
That brings a good question in my mind. So whenever because panromantic, obviously, you know, the entire spectrum of gender, a lot of people will say, I would love to be a lesbian, but I can't get over the fact that, you know, there's no dick, right?
Yeah.
Things like that, right? Do you find different things in the different genders attract? Like, are there things that you get from women that you have seen that you can't get from men, or like, do you see any differences? I
think there's definitely, I mean, you see that there are differences in people's bodies, but yeah, I don't really have a preference over one person's genitals or another. It's really about the person, and then we would communicate and talk about what we like and what we don't like. But yeah, it's not about the body. It's about that intimacy.
I love that. Yeah. To me, that's I mean, I'm obviously a lesbian, so I only prefer women, right? But to me, that is the future. Like, I see 100, 200 years down the line, I see a future where we don't look at the body at all. We don't look at the culture, the race, the whatever. We just look at the person.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it's like, I know I have a toolkit. I know how to use my toolkit, but it's always about what that other person likes.
You know, it's nice that you're mentioning that, because I do think people it's like being boxed in, like, the heteronormative, straight, like, way to have sex, like, is intercourse. And there's so many other ways to have sex that don't involve that at all. And I think it is just about finding someone who is compatible with that and isn't going to pressure you to do something that you don't want to do. I think that's really beautiful. Yeah. To have the sex that you want.
Yeah.
And however that's going to look. I mean, that's the most pleasurable way to do it.
Exactly. Just talk about your boundaries and be upfront and honest about what works. I know it can be very difficult to, like, at least for me, talk while being intimate with somebody. I get kind of nervous and, like, shy, but it is important. Like, communication is, like, number one, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you a question that I ask a lot of people who are in the queer community, identify as queer. What would you consider sex to be? Like, how do you define sex?
Yeah. That's an interesting question. I think it, again, has different levels depending on your identity and how your partner is. And I think it also depends on, you know, how many partners you have as well, because there are people who are polyamorous and exploring that kind of side of things. I think being naked is probably one of them. And I think there's a physical closeness involved. But that's kind of it. Like, there's no need to define sex as the heterosexual norm of penetration or things like that. It's just about the closeness, and I think that's kind of it.
No, that's good to hear, because again, every queer person I talk to, even in, like, the specific lesbian community, has a different definition.
Yeah.
And I've seen like couples too where one person will think that they had sex and then the other person wouldn't consider it sex.
Yeah, I think that's where, like, the sensuality comes in, and it's important to discuss, like, what boundaries and what things are in that territory versus the sexual territory.
Yeah. So I guess you identify as ace, panromantic. So I guess in the times that you have had sex, like, is it something that you feel you do for the other person, or do you actually have sexual desire?
I think it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
Like I said, in the one kind of, like, hookup thing, it definitely was kind of, well, for me, it was, I want to explore. So the first time I was with a man, too, was this, like, hookup thing. And it was more so, like, I really want to know what I feel in the moment, too, just because I didn't have any experience before that. And then I think it was really eye-opening after the fact of, like, that was definitely not for me.
Okay.
Previously, I had a partner that I was seeing who was, like, very easy to follow with and was very, like, comforting to have those kind of discussions and, like, lead me into things, which I think is really important as well. Going slow and seeing where things go and what you're comfortable with. And I think after developing that first friendship and then close friendship and then closer than friendship, it does spark something in me, but it's more like a simmer. I would love to discuss like the difference between asexuality, and there's also a term called autocorosexual.
I've never
which
heard
is
that.
a person who can be aroused by sexual material and can masturbate and fantasize or watch porn or all these things, but maybe or maybe does not have desire to find a partner. Another kind of click moment for my asexuality is I was talking with some friends in high school during our like lunch break, and we were talking about exploring ourselves and whatnot. And somebody was like, I can't go to sleep without masturbating. And the other person was like, I can't wake up without masturbating. And I'm like, really? Like, it's that? Like, that's so important to you? And it's like something that I see masturbation as like self-care almost. And as I'm like exploring my own sexuality, I kind of want to practice, I guess. Yeah. But it's important also to, again, like I don't want to make any kind of block in moments for myself of saying, I don't like this, I don't like that, without experiencing it. For me, it's like, especially in coming to terms with sexuality, I'm like, how am I supposed to know? And I think it's also really prevalent in like heterosexual culture and the assumption that, you know, seeing a little kid in kindergarten and like his shirt says like future wife stealer or something. It's like, why would you put that label on him when he hasn't even experienced anything like that?
Yeah.
So I think my biggest thing in my sexuality is like, I'm very much like a hands-on learner or something like that. Oh, yeah. But yeah, I don't really want to put any boxes around myself, and because I'm trying to put this as more of a focus for me. I've been very career oriented in the past, and I've come to a place where I'm like, I'm trying to build more social connections and and stuff like that. So I'm trying to do that kind of stereotypically college type sexual exploration now in my mid-20s.
Hey, SJ, that's awesome.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Just by someone who's been in the community, do you know anything about like the history of asexuality?
Yeah, for sure. And I did a little bit more research in preparation for this. So the first instance of asexuality being studied was 1869. In 1869, Karl Kirchbeny, in the same pamphlets arguing against Prussian sodomy law, he coined the terms homosexual and heterosexual, and also used the word monosexual to refer to people who only self-pleasure. Then in 1948, Dr. Alfred Kinsey invented the Kinsey scale, which included X for females who reported no socio or sexual attraction or reactions, and at that time, it was 1.5% of adult males who fell into this category. Again, in 1953 on the Kinsey scale, they discovered that 19% of female interviewees fell into this category, which I think is very interesting.
And the Kinsey Institute continues to do research, and
as they should. Then in a not so fun historical mark in 1969, Anton Szandor LaVey, in his book, The Satanic Bible, references asexuals and asexuality, stating Satanism condones any type of sexual activity which properly satisfies your individual desires, be it heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, or even asexual.
Interesting.
Thanks, Satanic Bible.
Oh, wow.
Then in 2001, David J. founded the Asexual Visibility and Education Network, AVEN, which has been an incredible resource to me personally. It's where I discovered a lot of terminology that I use. Then in 2009, AVEN participated in the first asexual entry for the American Pride Parade, which was during the San Francisco Pride Parade. In 2010, they introduced the Asexuality Pride flag, which consists of 4 horizontal lines, black, gray, white, and purple, and Asexuality Week, now called Ace Week, founded by Sarah Beth Brooks.
In 2010. Wow, that was
I
very
know.
Not that. It was like yesterday.
Wow.
Seems like...
Oh, man.
Yeah,
Okay.
very new stuff. It's old stuff, but new stuff.
Okay.
In 2012, it was the first International Asexual Conference. And then in 2019, Washington State became the first state to recognize Asexual Awareness Week. And then finally in 2020, Ria Debussy, an ace-spec transgender rights activist, became the founding executive director of the Ace and Arrow Alliance of Central Ohio.
Wow.
So a little bit of ace history there.
But going back to the 1800s.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an insane. And you never see the ace community really portrayed in the media, or even like, I don't even know people who, like, I can't think of one celebrity.
Not even one?
I can't. That I know.
Celebrity is Tim Gunn is asexual. He's the fashion guy.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So
Yeah,
he's kind of the only one in like real life people, but there's tons of asexual characters in media.
Okay.
Like, did you know SpongeBob is asexual?
No way.
Yes, it's been confirmed by Nickelodeon for sure.
I could see that.
So
I
there.
always thought he liked Sandy.
No,
although that makes sense.
They're
You know,
besties.
Okay.
So other really great ones. If anyone likes BoJack Horseman, there are 2 asexual characters in that. Alistair from Has Been Hotel is asexual. Varys, Game of Thrones. Daryl Dixon, Walking Dead.
Daryl, no way.
Yes, for sure. The actor who portrayed him said he portrays him in a way that asexuality is his identity.
That's cool.
That's really cool.
For fun podcasty things, if anyone likes the McElroy brothers, Sir Fitzroy Maplecourt from the Adventure Zone Graduation, Jonathan Sims from the Magnus Archive, and recently, literally like a couple of days ago, I am a big Critical Role fan. It's a Dungeons and Dragons play game, and we have a confirmed Caduceus Clay is an asexual, as well as a couple of days ago, Dariax, who was part of a mini-series from Critical Role, has been confirmed asexual, demisexual as well. And as Deadpool, Gwenpool is asexual, as well as, strangely, Perry the Platypus.
Interesting.
All right. Yeah.
Wow.
That's a lot more than I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was genuinely surprised. I was like, wow, that's great.
I didn't even know there was that much representation in the media. Did you have any, I don't know, podcasts, books, shows, or anything that helped you, I guess, with your journey on discovering your sexuality?
Yeah, I would say that the AVEN network has been my number one resource. I discovered them through Tumblr, and their resources there and definitions and different kind of like codes as well. My favorite thing that they kind of coined is asexuality cake. Are you aware of this
No.
phenomenon?
I've heard of like an intimacy cake where there's like layers to it.
I wasn't even going to bring that up. That's
Oh,
cool.
okay, yeah.
But no, asexuality and cake it's the idea that we'd rather eat cake than have sex, which I
have
love.
heard this. Yes, I have heard
which
that.
I love that.
Yeah, the intimacy cake that I'm talking about is like you imagine like levels of intimacy as layers of a cake, and so like the bottom layer is like what you absolutely need, and then the layer on top of that is like maybe you kind of like that, and the top layer is like, I don't know, it's you can like break it down. So anyways, not at all the same cake you're talking about.
No.
That's what mine was like, intimacy cake.
Ours
the
is
frosting you just throw
really
away.
good. No, all the frosting. Are you kidding? I love frosting. I just wanted to bring up also really famous Sherlock Holmes. Asexual character, and Jughead Jones, not in the Riverdale television show, but in the comics, he's asexual, which I think is great. But for resources, there's A's, which is a magazine for asexual, aromantic, and agender people, which publishes issues online. And there's also another podcast called, I love this, sounds fake, but okay, an asexual and aromantic perspective on love, relationships, sex, and pretty much anything else. It's a weekly podcast. But yeah, there's a ton of resources. I would say online communities are really great. I just saw a really small Facebook group of just ace in the DFW area. It's like 5 people, but it's nice to know that we're out there.
So now I kind of want to shed light on all like the spectrum of asexuality and the agender identities and the differences. So I'm going to do my best, guys, to put the flags up so you can kind of see them as well. So we have just the umbrella term of asexual, which is, no sexual attraction is experienced. And then we did touch on demisexual, which is also that you need some type of bond and things like that. There's also gray sexual,
yes,
where you experience sexual attraction rarely and or weekly and or ambiguously.
Oh, weekly. I thought you meant like weekly, like monthly.
Oh, like that?
I was like, oh, that's
Like
really
timeline.
specific.
Every Tuesday.
Yeah.
So I guess those are people that it's just like it's an uncommon, like maybe on the birthdays or something, like they're feeling
more
like
Interesting.
rare.
Maybe I'm a little demi-gray also.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Labels are good. And then there's ace flux, which is an orientation which fluctuates across the ace spectrum. So I feel like that's very similar to like gender fluid, but via the ace community.
For
right?
sure.
There is phrasexual. They are not deeply connected with attraction, dissipates once a bond occurs. Am I reading that?
So that's more like hookup culture
okay.
type of thing.
Oh yeah,
maybe.
so you don't need. Yeah. You don't. Okay. Oh, I'm a phrasexual.
Hey!
Sexual attraction for those who are not. So I'm not deeply connected with, and it disappears once a bond occurs. Look at me discovering things.
Look at us. Hell yeah.
Phrasexual, lesbian. Okay. All right. There's also achiosexual. So this is someone who experiences sexual attraction but has feelings, and they fade if reciprocated, which is interesting. I feel like that's like the push-pull like type thing. Like you're into them because they're not into you, and
that was me.
That was really
probably still is me. I'm married now, but like that's what I would fall under. For sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And then there's the opposite would be reciprosexual, which you don't experience sexual attraction until they know that the person is attracted to them. Which I also feel like a lot of people.
That could be me as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And then there's cupiosexual. This is someone who does not experience sexual attraction, but still desires or likes a sexual relationship. I wonder if that's like the intimacy that you get.
Yeah, I'm wondering if that's also another, like a condensed term of like heterosexual, aromantic type of thing, or like having that sexual attraction but no romance involved.
Okay. I could see that. And then there's ace spike. This is someone who normally doesn't experience sexual attraction, but on a rare occasion will have an intense spike in it. And then there's ansexual. So this is someone who has a lack of interest in all kinds of sexual pleasure, interaction, or attraction, whether it be engaging in it or hearing about it, other people engaging in it too. So interesting. I'm surprised they didn't put repulsive in here, but okay.
There's one more term, which is allosexual, and that's just basically somebody who does experience sexual attraction. So just like we have cis for or versus trans, it's allosexual versus asexual.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay. I like that.
I like
that
that
a lot.
too.
Okay. I mean, do you have any other things you would like to share?
Yes, I have fun facts.
Please.
Yes.
Let's get to the fun facts. So in 2005, there is a kind of symbol that asexuals use to identify themselves, which is a black ring worn on the middle finger of the right hand. It doesn't matter kind of what kind of ring it is, as long as it's that. And then an arrow ring, which is a white ring worn on the left hand middle finger. Some people also do a gray ring for gray or demisexuality. Another fun term, as well as ace, is used for asexuality as like a code or like a shortened term. Arrows is a homophone to the shortened words used by aromantic people, like a bow and arrow. Yeah. And then this one I love and use more so now than ever, a squish, which is a non-sexual crush on somebody. You just give them a little squish, as opposed to a crush, which I love.
I do like that.
That reminds me a little bit of like the term monogamish.
Oh yeah,
like I'm mostly monogamous,
hetero-flexible type of thing.
Yeah, it's like a little bit,
I like that. Okay.
And then ace playing cards are often used to like represent different ace identities. Ace of clubs is more gray asexuality and gray romanticism. Ace of diamonds is more demi-romantic, demisexuality. Ace of hearts and ace of spades are for romantic asexuality versus asexual.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, I like that.
And then do y'all know the door analogy for all of the sexuality? I love this one.
Please.
So a gay or straight person is a door that swings one way or the other, one way or the other. A bisexual person is a door that swings both ways. Pansexual is a revolving door. Demisexuality is a door that's locked, and asexuality is a wall.
Wow, love it.
I like
the door
that.
is painted on a wall.
I like that. That's a really good way to like
That is a
envision
really
it,
good
right?
way. Wow.
I swing both ways. It's because you're a door.
Type
of thing. Yeah.
I was like, oh man, this is the light bulbs in my head. This is
I
great.
love me a good analogy.
Me too, yo. Me too. Lyndsey, do you have any questions? I have a couple.
The last question I have for you is just, what would you say is the best way for an ally to advocate for the ACE community?
I think just being supportive and not pressuring anybody into a relationship that they don't want is really important, as well as not pressuring somebody into a sexual relationship that they don't want, and not having any judgment or stigma about that individual person's like choice to engage or not.
Okay. Yeah.
I would also like piggybacking off of that, and this is for the people who are like tuning in. I do think educating yourself is a big form of advocacy. Like
Yes.
I think to remove like judgment and shame, you have to educate yourself, and so there's like there's some work to do
For sure.
but it's important work to do. Like don't just do the work that only is about you. Like do it for communities that you're not a part of, so you can understand.
Yeah, and I think it's also really important. Again, the self-education is important.
Yes.
Because as much as I love to educate people, and I'm always an open book, it is not a queer person's responsibility to educate you.
Totally.
And if you don't educate yourself, there's nothing that we can do aside from lecture you to have any kind of respect as well. Of like, well, if I'm educating you personally and you're still not getting it, there's nothing I can do at that point.
Yeah, totally agree.
And piggybacking on your question, as far as an ally, what advice would you give someone who is dating someone who is part of the ACE community? Like, what do you wish your partners knew? Yeah,
I think communication, number one, 100%. And I think also, as somebody who has a hard time differentiating between like platonic friendship and romantic feelings, be upfront about how you are feeling with somebody. Define whether it is a platonic relationship, a romantic, a sensual, or a sexual relationship, and then discuss boundaries. It's definitely important to take it slow, at least in my experience. Take things slow and just get to know the person and what they like.
Okay, that's good.
And I do want everyone to know that like if you're an asexual person, your partner is not, you can still have a successful relationship with them. I think there's very much a belief that you have to find someone else who identifies exactly as you do. But I don't think that's true. That's not true in my experience
Not at all.
as a therapist either. You can make it work. Just like you said, if you communicate and you respect each other's boundaries, it can be a really beautiful relationship.
Yeah, it's all about compatibility. Like I said, not all asexual people are opposed to sex.
Yeah.
It's just about that internal drive.
Exactly.
So if your partner is wanting to have sex on a more regular basis, just be open and communicate with that and be there for them if you can. And if you're not able to, then discuss that as well.
Totally.
Do you ever find yourself like, because, you a lot of times you'll do these things for your partner because, this is a desire that they like. Do you ever find yourself experience compersion at all? Compersion is the when you feel pleasure because your partner is feeling pleasure.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a really big part of it as well. Of like, I think having sex as well as like a very big mental game as well. And I think the encouragement is always well received too.
My last question, because I really want to speak to the person who's questioning whether they're asexual or agender. What advice, like, speak to your younger self. What advice would you give that young SJ that wasn't sure, was, trying to figure it out?
Yeah, that's a hard one. Little me. I would say focus on you, do the things that you love, find people you have things in common with, and know that you're not alone. We are a small community, but we are out there. I think it's really affirming to have other ACE friends that you can relate to, whether that be in life, in person, or online. And just know that you can be confident in yourself without having a romantic pursuit. Romance is also often put on like the forefront of everything. And a lot of people's lives revolve around their partner and their relationships. And you can have a fulfilling life, not necessarily with that.
I love that advice. That's good.
Thank you.
That's awesome.
Okay. Yeah. Is there anything else you would like to share before I ask you the closer question?
I don't think so.
Oh, perfect. All right. So just to give you my spiel that I give everybody, this is very much a sex positive podcast, right? Part of the sex positive movement. And the three big takeaways that I've learned as far as the sex positive movement is, one, consent is the biggest thing that we need to be talking about, like the consent. That's rule number one. Everything needs consent. Number two is that we include all types of people, sexualities, cultures, genders. Like, you know, we just try to be very inclusive to everybody around. And then the third one, which I also think is very important, is sexual education. You know, the ability to preach comprehensive and inclusive sexual education. So I'm curious, and I want to know your guardians at home, and also what formal sexual education you received in school.
For sure. I learned a lot from Glee.
Oh wow!
So my mom used Glee as like a learning opportunity. Of
Love
anytime I saw something I wasn't really sure about, I could always come to her and kind of explain that. My parents were always very open and honest about things. We never really had like the sex talk, but I was able to ask questions when needed. And in school, I remember in middle school, we had like a day that we sat down and separated our biological genders assigned by government papers. And we watched little videos talking about puberty, and that was kind of it. I did take like a queer history class in college, but it didn't really cover like genetics or anything. I would love to take more time to learn about the actual like biology of gender, because again, intersex community is very much overlooked.
Yes, it is.
But yeah, sex education in America needs more attention.
Oh, it needs so much work.
So much work.
Yeah.
So was middle school the only course you had? You didn't have.
I didn't have anything in high school.
Me too. Okay, where'd you grow up? DFW.
DFW area, yeah.
Oh man, yeah, same.
Yay, Texas.
I just started watching the show Sex Education.
Yeah.
Have you seen?
Yeah,
that?
there's 2 characters in there that identify as asexual as well.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah,
that show.
such a good resource.
I can't believe I haven't seen it sooner. But I just started watching it, and it's a British show, and they have like, they're in high school, and there's a whole course. It's called like SRE. It's like sex and relationship education. There's a whole course on it, and it's.
I wish.
The funny thing about that show is it is a British show, but the way they set up the high school is not British at all.
No.
Like, it's a very American-styled British school.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know, when I first started watching it, I didn't put together that it was a British show until there were like terms that were clearly British. And then I was like, wait, because when you look at the school, it does look like it could be down the street.
Yeah, it's like got lockers and Letterman jackets and blah, blah, blah. So it's really strange. But it's a great resource to learn.
Good.
Sure.
They use consultants on that show. So I did an interview for some article like a while back, and the person who interviewed me was a consultant for that show. So it's really smart because the information you get on there is accurate.
Yeah, I will say sex education is the first time I saw like a clearly defined asexual character, because a lot of time it's like, well, they don't really do anything, I guess they're asexual, but this one was like, I think I'm asexual, like, we should talk about this. Yeah,
because I think a lot of the like shows you were mentioning earlier, I wouldn't put that together because they don't really like specify.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But when they do specify, it's kind of nice.
Yeah,
I love
like,
it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, BoJack was the first time I ever saw someone who actually like specified.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I forgot the character's name, but yeah, it was the first
Todd
time I saw
or
it.
Yolanda.
There we go, Todd. Yeah, I remember Todd. So yeah, as far as your informal, the one at home, how old were you when you received that?
When Glee started, I think I was in the 5th grade, which ages me, but also youths me.
Yeah,
I guess a little bit. But yeah, so probably around 12, 13.
Okay.
And that's kind of when like the pretend relationships started in like middle school too. But yeah, it was really great to have that resource. And I think I was also on the internet in some weird corners and saw some words that I didn't understand and would bring those up too and just be like, what does this mean? Okay, cool. Moving on. I will say I do have like a lot of queer family, so I kind of grew up in an accepting environment. My parents also are artists and work in the theater as well, so it's something that I've been around a lot. It just, growing up, I didn't ever assume one way or another. I kind of just assumed I was straight, but never had that action to prove it. And then when I discovered asexuality and queerness, it was like, oh, I think this is probably where I'm at.
Love it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I love it. Okay. Yeah. No, that's my last question.
Cool.
Okay.
This is great.
Great. Well, SJ, thanks so much again for coming on the show. This has been really awesome. I mean, you've taught us some things.
Yay!
I've got some takeaways now from this episode. And to all of our listeners, Well, like I said earlier, we'll definitely post links of where to find SJ.
So I just revamped my website and rebranded a little bit. You can find me at sjrichman.com. I also will be prop designing my first show in DFW called The Pirates of Penzance at Theater 3.
Holy crap.
Do you know that show?
I've heard through theater.
That's a big deal.
It is a big deal. Yeah, I'm
huge
really
deal.
excited. I've done a lot of theater work I was based in Florida for 3 years, and it was a time for sure. It definitely was a time. But I'm really excited to get to know the community here because it's something that I kind of grew up around, but never in a like professional environment. So check me out there. We're getting started soon on rehearsals and all that. And I do artist commissions. I have I can't decide what medium I like the best. So I do paintings, I do sculptures, I do embroidery recently has been really fun. So if you like what you see online, shoot me a message.
Will do.
Yeah. So we'll have their website listed in the episode description and we'll make sure everyone has access to all of that.
Awesome.
So
Yes.
it's very exciting.
Yes, guys. And on the spirit of this asexuality and agender episode, I do want to also include the audience, guys. So if you are a part of this spectrum and you have any media that helped you, whether it's podcasts, YouTube channels, books, shows, anything you can think of, if you want to throw that in the comments, just so that way, if anyone's looking for more information, they have them in our beautiful comment section.
Yeah. Great. Well, yeah, everyone, thanks for tuning in. Please remember to like, subscribe, and follow us here, whether it's on YouTube or whether it's anywhere that you get your podcasts. And just so everyone knows, we are open for listener support. And so even if you want to donate as low as $1 a month, that just helps us continue to produce the content that you all deserve, and we also take listener requests. So if there's any topic you'd like us to cover, please let us know. You can email us, you can leave us a comment, and we will cover it because we love doing that. So again, thanks everyone, and we are Sex Positivity Unfiltered. Remember to stay curious and fuck politeness.